moment you've all been waiting for. The tension is building. Are you ready? It's time for the final countdown. Let's count down together. The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, good evening, everyone. Tonight, I want to begin with a question. Not a leadership question, no, not a leadership question. Not a management question either. A life question. I want to begin tonight's conversation with a life question. What conversation have you been avoiding? That's the question. What conversation have you been avoiding? Take a moment, think about it. Maybe it's with one of your staff, a colleague, your spouse, your child, your parent, a friend, or perhaps it's a conversation with yourself. Now let me ask you something even more difficult. What has avoiding that conversation already cost you? Has it cost you trust? Has it cost you peace? So instead of talking to the person, it is sending up your blood pressure, but you refuse to have that conversation. Has it cost you a relationship because you remained quiet? Has it cost your organization an opportunity to grow? Because here's something I've learned over the years. Very few organizations collapse overnight. Very few marriages end because of one argument. Very few friendships disappear after one misunderstanding. More often, relationships slowly weaken because people stop saying what needs to be said. So tonight's conversation isn't about becoming more confrontational, no. It's about becoming more courageous. So welcome to Leadership Unscripted. And tonight's discussion is called One Conversation Can Change a Life. So why do we avoid difficult conversation? Why do people avoid difficult conversation? And as the flyer says earlier, and I've been saying it earlier, silence can be very expensive. It can cost you things you really don't want to lose. So are you going to remain silent? Are you going to remain silent? So let's begin with complete honesty. No names, no explanations, just one word. Who is a difficult conversation with? Type one word in the comment. Who do you really want to have a difficult conversation with, but you're holding back? Could be a colleague, a friend, a teacher, your partner, your boss, the sibling. Let me see, who do you really want to have a difficult conversation with? Could be parent, your child, your boss, an employee, a teacher, a friend, your spouse, sibling, or is it yourself? And I'm going to go out first and say, it's been a while. I need to really sit and have a conversation with myself. There are some difficult questions I need to ask myself. And I try to use other things to keep me occupied from sitting down and answering some question for myself. So is there anyone on the live tonight who you want to ask someone a question, but you keep avoiding asking that question? So remember that when you refuse to have those difficult conversations, it's not a leadership issue, you know. It's more a human issue. Every one of us has experienced moments where we knew conversations needed to happen, but we kept putting it off. Flay says, I will say as well myself. Yes, I need to have a conversation with myself. Welcome, Adriana. I need to have a conversation with myself before I go back to work. Before I go back to work, I need to have a conversation, a heart-to-heart conversation with myself. So is there somebody who you need to have a conversation with? You don't need to put it in the chat if you don't want to. But sometimes we cannot keep putting it off. So can I suggest something tonight? Most leaders, most people don't avoid difficult conversations because they don't care. Sometimes they really care. Sometimes we really care. And sometimes we avoid them because we care too deeply. We're afraid of saying something wrong. We are afraid of saying the wrong thing. Sometimes we don't have those conversations because we're afraid of damaging relationships. So royalty says reputation too. Sometimes we refuse to have that conversation, that difficult conversation, because we're afraid of conflict. And we sit and overthink it and think we don't want to make things worse. So we ignore it. We remain silent. Flay says sometimes we're trying to please people. People pleasing. Ironically, avoiding the conversation often creates the very outcome we're trying to prevent. Avoiding the conversation creates the very outcome, remaining silent. So you remain silent because you don't want to cause problem. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to damage a relationship. You don't want to cause any conflict. You don't want to make things worse. But guess what? When you avoid those conversations, you create the very outcome you were trying to prevent. Think about that. So silence doesn't, and so royalty says, or sometimes we're trying to protect our emotions. Very good. So true. And sometimes silence, it doesn't protect relationships, whether we like it or not. Being silent doesn't protect relationships. Guess what protects relationships? Healthy communications. Whether in the work, whether in your home, whether with your children, your spouse, your friends, your colleagues, silence doesn't protect relationship. It damages them. It festers away. You allow things to boil up until you can't take it anymore. Then comes the big outburst. No. Healthy communication is what will protect and keep relationships going. So I want you to think about your life. Think about your life. Has there ever been a conversation you wish someone had with you sooner? Think about your own life. Has there ever been a conversation you wish someone had with you sooner? Maybe someone noticed you were struggling, but they never asked. Maybe someone saw your potential, but they never took the time to encourage you. Maybe someone recognized a problem, but they stayed silent. How different might your life have been if that conversation had happened earlier? Maybe your partner saw a lot of things they disliked, a lot of troubling things, and instead of saying something to you, they remain silent. How different might your life have been? How different would the outcome of that relationship be if that conversation had happened earlier? Think about that. So our first scenario for tonight. Imagine you're a principal. You're the principal of a school. One of your teachers has become noticeably quieter over the past few weeks. Their lessons aren't as energetic. They're arriving just on time, leaving, and they leave immediately after school. Staff begin whispering. Some assume they're becoming disengaged. Others think they're simply tired. You notice, but every day you tell yourself, I'll speak to them tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. Then one Friday afternoon, the teacher resigns. During the exit interview, they quietly say, I kept hoping someone would ask if I was okay. My question to you as the principal, could one conversation have changed the outcome? Do you think so? Do you think one conversation could have changed the outcome? Do you think one conversation could have stopped that teacher from resigning? I see Adrian and Faith say, definitely yes. Definitely yes. The teacher says, I kept hoping someone would ask if I was okay. Nobody did. No staff did. No friend did. Nobody on the leadership team did. And if you're a leader in here, in whatever organization, not just schools, in whatever industry you are, remember to be more observant. If you're a friend, a colleague, remember to be more observant. Sometimes people just want you to genuinely ask if they are okay. Sometimes people they're passing by, they're yearning for somebody to just ask, how are you doing? And that can change a lot of things. And that's why tonight's conversation is very important. We cannot always remain quiet. Silence can be expensive. 1876 teacher says, in most instances, the said principal does not truly care about the teacher's well-being. That's true. That can be true as well. That can be true. But it doesn't kill to ask how you're doing. How are you doing? Because when you remain quiet, exactly, Ochi, that's what it's saying. You don't care. How can you observe a teacher and you keep putting off talking to that teacher? Their performance changed. They're no longer energetic. They come to school just on time, leave a school dismissed. And as a leader, you don't ask the question, what is wrong? You keep putting it off. You keep putting it off. So how many people around us are waiting for someone to notice? How many of our friends, our spouse, or families, or colleagues are going through a lot and is just waiting for us to ask, how are you doing? So let's be honest. Leadership isn't only about solving problems. It isn't. Sometimes leadership is about asking one simple question. Thank you, Mandy, for reminding them. Tap the live, please. Sometimes leadership is about asking one simple question. How are you? And mean it. Check up on people. Check in on your friends. Check in on your family members. Check in on your colleagues. Check in on your boss. Check in on your partner. Because sometimes they're not doing well, but you remain silent and refuse to ask that one question. How are you doing? So you're not going to ask that question while walking past someone. No. Not between meetings. No. Not while looking at your phone. No. But sitting down and listening. Giving someone your full attention. Because sometimes the most important leadership decision you'll make, the most important decision you'll make as a person is deciding not to postpone a conversation, not to postpone checking up on someone, not to postpone asking, how are you doing? That's the most important decision you'll make sometimes. So here's one of the greatest myths in leadership. People think avoiding conflict keeps the peace. Some leaders, they refuse to ask certain questions because guess what? They're trying to avoid conflict. And they think avoiding conflicts and not ask those questions, not having those difficult conversations, they're keeping the peace. It doesn't. It doesn't. It postpones the conflict. What it does is postpone the conflict. And postponed conflict usually becomes more complicated. Because if there's an issue and you don't talk about it, the person will not know there's an issue. And they keep doing the same thing over and over and over. So over time, it becomes more complicated. So Royalty says, sometimes a person so scarred, it is so difficult to do that welfare check. That's true. That is true. It can be difficult. But that's why if you're in an organization, you operate as a team. So if you can't do it, get someone on the team to do it. That person must be close to somebody. Alert their friend. Alert someone in their year level. Alert someone they're close with. But don't leave it unnoticed. Don't remain silent. Don't remain silent. So as I said, postponed conflict usually becomes more complicated. Think about a small crack in the wall of your home. Just think about a small crack in the wall of your home. If you notice it early, it's often manageable. Ignore it for a month. Water gets in and the crack spreads. Repairs become expensive. Relationships work the same way. Small misunderstandings, when ignored, often becomes major divisions. Not because the issue was impossible to solve, but because nobody addressed it early. Nobody addressed it early. So I'd like everyone to complete this sentence. I'd like everyone in the chat, complete this sentence for me. I avoid difficult conversations because, why do you think people avoid difficult conversations? I'm going to go out front. Sometimes you really don't want to hurt people. So you avoid having those difficult conversations. Let me hear from you. What are some reasons you think or you know people avoid having difficult conversations? Protection. Let me see some other responses. Tonight's discussion is a dialogue. It's not just me talking at you. So I saw protection already. And earlier I said, sometimes you don't want to hurt people. You don't want to hurt their feelings. Let me see from somebody else. What's one reason you think sometimes people refuse, they avoid it. They avoid having difficult conversations. Someone says protection. I said earlier, sometimes we don't want to hurt people's feelings. And doing that is not doing them any good. It's not doing the situation any good. The situation will just continue to fester. It's like you see a little sore in yourself. And you ignore the sore. You ignore it today. Flares is afraid of the outcome. It's like a little sore, it's like a little cut. Protecting their feelings. Very good. Confidence or poor self-esteem. Sometimes you're afraid they'll get angry with you. So you want to protect friendship. You want to protect good image. You want to remain the likable one. Sometimes you really don't know what to say as well. Sometimes there's some situations you really don't know what to say or how to start addressing the situation. Or sometimes we keep hoping things will improve on their own. And do you notice something? Most of the answers we've provided comes from fear, not from wisdom, come from fear. And leadership requires us to manage fear. We need to manage fear without allowing fear to make our decisions. So we can't allow because we want to protect people's feeling. We don't want to hurt them. We don't want them to become angry. Because we're afraid of the outcome. Because of poor self-esteem. Because we don't know what to say. Donna says afraid of contention. We can't allow fear of those things to allow us not to have those difficult conversations. Not to have the conversations we need. Because guess what? It will not go away by itself. It will not go away by itself. The conversation you refuse to have today will not go away by itself. You're going to eventually have to have it. So best you have it now, while it is one thing or two things, rather than wait 3 months when it has now been tripled and flupled and quadrupled. And the longer you wait, the more difficult that conversation becomes. Always remember that. So imagine a father, imagine this. Imagine a father notices his teenage son becoming unusually quiet. The boy spends more time in his room. Stops talking at dinner. He doesn't talk at dinner anymore. His grades start to slip. His father notices, but he assumes it's probably just adolescence. Weeks pass, months pass, the distance grows. Years later, the father says, I wish I'd asked more questions. Now, my question to you on live tonight, when was the best time to have that conversation? Was it yesterday, last month, or the first time he noticed something had changed? When was the best time to have that conversation? He waited years. And after years, he said to himself, I wish I'd asked more questions. So my question to you, when was the best time for him to have that conversation? Was it yesterday, last month, or the first time he noticed something had changed? So Royalty says, exactly. Once you see things changing, you have the conversation. And that's how you maintain healthy relationships. That's how you keep people accountable. Having the conversation the very minute you observe it. You don't have the conversation, you observe and create the environment for him to speak to you. And that too, DJG. Sometimes you don't want to have the conversation, but guess what? You create the environment exactly for him to speak to you free. But what if he doesn't? What if he doesn't? What if he doesn't? You create the environment, you ensure that he's okay to talk to you. What if he does? What if he still doesn't? I'm sure you're going to have that conversation if you realize that having created that environment, then you're doing something. So if you create the environment and he doesn't speak to you freely, do you think you're doing something wrong? Or does it depend on what the child is going through? It could depend on what the child is going through. So you could listen. You can create an environment hoping the child will speak to you and will speak freely to you, but depends on what it depends on what they're going through. What if it's something they're really embarrassed about? Or what if it's something they know as a father they've let you down? You could create as many environments as you want. If they're embarrassed by it, if they think they've disappointed you, they won't speak on it. When plan A don't work, when plan A don't work, you go, all right, go to plan B. So at least you're proactive, you're proactive, you're proactive. So you're not ignoring it. The good thing is that you're not ignoring it. And that is what I want to bring across tonight. Do not, when you see changes, don't ignore it. So the earlier we address concern with compassion, the greater the opportunity for healing. The earlier we address concerns with compassion, the greater the opportunity for healing. So here's something every person should remember. Let me see what Sorrel, based on the context of the situation, because you don't want it to escalate. That's true. You don't want it to escalate. So it depends on the context for real. So here's something I want everyone on this platform tonight to remember. People rarely need perfect words. People rarely need perfect words. They need genuine care. They need genuine care. Sometimes we avoid conversations because we're trying to find the perfect sentence. But when you care, and as a leader, it isn't about perfection, you know. It's about presence. Sometimes beginning with, I've noticed something, and I wanted to check in because I care. A simple sentence as that can open the stage, can set the stage for great conversation. And it is enough to open a door that someone has been hoping would open. So just let them know you've noticed something and you wanted to check because you care. That will open the door they've been waiting for you to open. So I want you to write this in the chat. One of the moderators, write this in the chat for me, one of the moderators. The conversation you keep postponing today may become the crisis you're trying to solve tomorrow. What did I say? The conversation you keep postponing today may become the crisis you're trying to solve tomorrow. So you observe one of your staff coming to work late. You ignore it. Then two other staff realize that coming late is acceptable. So guess what? They start coming late too. Until half your staff start showing up late. Your children at home, they eat their dinner and they get up from around the table. They don't push the chair under and they don't remove their plate and take it to the sink and throw their leftover in the garbage. They leave it on the table and you clean up after them. Your partner go out and stay out late and come in drunk. You ignore it. You don't speak about it. Your partner speak to you loud, aggressively. You don't like it, but you don't say anything. Your children in public speak to you a certain way, and you don't like it. It's embarrassing, but you don't say anything. That's why I say conversation you keep postponing today may become the very crisis you will have to solve tomorrow. Think about that. Because problems rarely become smaller through silence. They don't. They usually become more complicated. So one conversation can change a life. Just one. So why do we keep avoiding having those difficult conversations? So earlier we asked a question that I hope to stay with you. What conversation have you been avoiding? That question was asked earlier. Not because you don't care, but because you're afraid of what might happen if you have that conversation. And can I tell you something I've learned? Most difficult conversations don't become difficult because of the words we use. They become difficult because we've waited too long to have them. Think about that. So a conversation that should have lasted 10 minutes becomes a conflict that lasts 10 months. Not because the problem was impossible to solve, no, but because silence gave it time to grow. You see how powerful silence is? Silence gave the problem time to grow. So guess what? We shouldn't avoid conversations because it can be an uncomfortable moment. Leaders shouldn't avoid conversations because it can be uncomfortable. No. Leadership is about recognizing that temporary discomfort often prevents permanent damage. In our own lives, outside of leadership, in our own lives, temporary discomfort, having that conversation that will cause temporary discomfort, it is going to prevent permanent damage. Having that difficult conversation, your partner may feel away. Your children may feel hurt, but guess what? Having that conversation is very, very important. So I want everyone watching tonight to answer honestly. I want you to answer honestly. The hardest difficult conversation you've ever had was with who? A family member, a friend, a colleague, a child, a parent, an employee, your boss, or yourself. So Royal says partner. I would say a colleague. Sometimes myself too, because sometimes when you sit down and you have that conversation with yourself, you said, whoa, I was a bit hard on myself there. Sometimes when you really sit down and talk to yourself and question yourself about some situations, you realize sometimes you're harsh on yourself. Donna says, myself. Let me hear from two other people in the live. The hardest, difficult conversation you've ever had. Who was it with? I saw a partner already. I saw myself. What else? And nobody ever had to have some difficult conversation with their children? Or even their boss? Sometimes you see a boss, you have to really let your boss know, no, you can't, you can't do that. You can't do that. Even though the person is your boss, you have to stand up for yourself and have that conversation. Shorty says, partner. Yeah, man, sometimes you have to have the conversation because if you don't, and your child, if you don't, it's going to fester. It grow. If you not eliminate itself, it doesn't eliminate itself. It doesn't go away. The conversation you refuse to have today, you're going to end up having it later on. So now let me ask you another question. How did you feel after you finally had the conversation? Did you feel relieved? Did you feel lighter? Did you feel closer to the person? Did you feel more hopeful? Let me hear from you. Did you feel relieved? After having that difficult conversation, did you feel relieved? Did you feel lighter? Did you feel closer, more hopeful? Sometimes when I have a conversation with myself, it gives me context, it gives me clarity. Or sometimes all you need is clarity. Sometimes I'm having a cocoa with my child, and I'm wondering if he's ready for this. A conversation with the child, and you're wondering if he's ready for this. Sometimes, yes, it gives you relief sometimes. Sometimes you feel like a burden is lifted, exactly. And sometimes it makes the connection and relationship between the person stronger too. Donna says it makes you more confident, yes. And sometimes it draws you on that person even closer because they start trusting your honesty. And sometimes people start respecting you more. And they know which boundary to pass with you. They know what to do and what not to do when it comes on to you. It tells people what you accept, what is acceptable. Needed to say that to get the heavy weight off your chest. Exactly. Sometimes it tells people not to cross certain line with you. It tells people what you stand for. They also value you more. People respect you more when you talk up. Exactly. I like the comments coming from the live. So if you notice something, most people will never regret having difficult conversations. You never regret. The regret comes when you wait too long. When you wait too long. Until it becomes a culture. Until people think it's acceptable to treat you a certain way, to talk to you a certain way, to do certain things in your presence. If you had that conversation earlier, they wouldn't think that's acceptable. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been on a school compound? Whether you're a teacher, parent, anybody, have you ever been in a school compound and you will see children doing things they ought not to do, or they're running and they see one teacher coming and they stop immediately and shuffle up, and then they see another teacher coming and they continue doing what they're doing like nobody's passing? Have you ever witnessed that? Have you ever witnessed that? Or even in your home, your children will try something with their grandparents or with one parent, but once one of the parents is there, they won't dare try it. Have you ever witnessed that? Have you ever witnessed someone will speak to someone a certain way, but they will not dare try it with you? Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen that? That is because when things happen the first time, if you don't nip it in the bud, if you don't address it, it's going to grow, because people start thinking it is acceptable to behave and operate that way with you and around you and in your presence. And that's a lesson I'm taking for myself too, because sometimes I can be very nice and I allow things to slip by and hoping that the person know that it's not acceptable. And 99.999 times they don't know it's not acceptable. Sometimes they don't know. So that's a lesson I'm taking for myself. So while I'm presenting in the nights, while I'm doing my research, I'm learning as well, and I'm shaping my own leadership. Exactly, so, and use it to control you. Exactly. People will manipulate you, you know. People will manipulate you, and if you don't let them know what is what, sometimes if you don't put people in their place respectfully, they'll think you're a pushover and walk over, and they will take you for one gig. They will take you for a gig. If you stand for nothing, finish that quote. If you stand for nothing. So one of the greatest mistakes leaders make is believing that kindness means avoiding difficult conversations. It doesn't. Real kindness tells the truth with compassion. And there's a difference between being nice and being kind. What did I say? There is a difference between being nice and being kind. When you're too nice, when you're being nice, you avoid having that uncomfortable discussion. You avoid discomfort. When you're being kind, you care enough to address what needs attention. What did I say? You care enough what needs attention. To address what needs attention. So imagine a doctor discovering a serious illness. Would kindness be pretending everything is fine? Of course not. Kindness tells the truth carefully. Because healing begins with honesty. What did I say? Healing begins with honesty. And in leadership, it's no different. Sometimes the most compassionate things you can do is have the conversation everyone else is avoiding. What did I say? Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is having that conversation everyone is dancing around. Everyone is dancing around it. Nobody wants to ask that question. Nobody wants to have the conversation. Sometimes that's the most compassionate and caring thing you can do. So imagine this. Here's another scenario. Imagine this. Imagine you're leading a department. One member of your team is exceptionally talented. Everyone likes them because of that. They're hardworking, they're committed, they're positive. But recently, their work has started slipping. Deadlines are being missed. Details are overlooked. Colleagues are quietly compensating for their mistakes. You notice, as a leader for the department, you notice. Others notice too. But nobody says anything. 6 months later, performance has declined significantly. Now the conversation is no longer about support. It's about formal performance management. My question to you, when should the conversation have happened? On the first missed deadline, the 5th, or 6 months later? Let me hear from you. When should that first conversation have happened? Should it be on the first missed deadline, the 5th one, or 6 months later? I'm going to go out on a limb and say on the first missed deadline. And you're not going to be harsh. You're going to ask, I realize you missed your deadline. Is everything okay? As simple as that. That will tell the person that you notice. You notice. And the next time they miss, they're going to know that you're going to notice. So you ask the question. So, you never normally miss your deadline. You're always on time. Why did you miss it? Is everything okay? You're asking because you care. And you're having a conversation with compassion and concern too. For the employee, not for the work, for the employee. You want to know that everything is okay. And then they'll tell you if they're having any struggles, why it was late. And you can have that conversation. And both of you will walk away having a mutual agreement. But most importantly, the employee will walk away knowing late submission or missing deadline is not something that is tolerated. But if you ignore it, it's going to happen 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and then it becomes culture. And those ignored, you ignoring, you being silent and not having those conversations may 6-7 months down the line result in you having to discipline or fire that same person. And that could have been avoided if you had that conversation from earlier. We must also remember that one caring conversation could prevent months of frustration. You know that? Sometimes you have team members, sometimes you have family members, friends, colleagues. They're struggling. And you watch them struggle. You don't have that conversation. You don't find out if everything is right. You watch them struggle. But if you've had that conversation from earlier, you could have prevented months of frustration. And that's why sometimes feedback, it isn't punishment, you know. It isn't punishment. It's an investment. An investment in the person. An investment in the person that you care for them. Remember that. So let's challenge another myth. We're going to challenge another myth now. People often say, I don't want to hurt their feelings. Can I suggest something? Ignoring a problem doesn't always protect people. Sometimes it leaves them without the information they need to improve. Think about a teacher who never receives honest feedback. A student who never learns why they're struggling. A child who never hears this behavior isn't acceptable. A colleague who never knows how their behavior is affecting the team. Think about all those situations. Silence may feel comfortable today, but it can become unfair tomorrow. Because people deserve the opportunity to grow. And every growth begins with the truth. So if the teacher doesn't know how they're doing, a student doesn't know what area they're struggling in, a child never hears when their behavior is not acceptable, how are they going to grow if you never tells them the truth? Growth begins with the truth. So here's something I want everyone on this platform tonight to remember. Feedback. When you give people feedback, it is one of the highest forms of respect. If you're a leader, when you give people in your organization feedback, it is one of the highest form of respect. Why? Because you're saying, I believe you're capable of becoming even better. That's what feedback does. When you give a child feedback on their work, when you go and watch a teacher, when you walk in a teacher's classroom and you give them feedback, it is the highest form of respect for that person. Because you're saying, I believe in you and I believe you're capable of becoming even better. So think about the people who've influenced your life. A coach, a teacher, a mentor, a parent. Did they simply raise you? Did they simply praise you, Or did they lovingly challenge you? Because most of us become stronger because someone cared enough to tell us the truth. Not harshly, not publicly, not to embarrass us either, but privately, respectfully, with the intention of helping us grow. And that's leadership. Why is my mother on the live? Mommy, you need to go to sleep. It's your bedtime. Now, here's another scenario. Imagine you're the principal. You notice a newly qualified teacher struggling with classroom management. You have two options. Option A, you avoid the conversation because you don't want to discourage them. Or option B, you invite them into your office. You begin by recognizing their strength. Then you say, can I share something I've noticed? Because I want to help you succeed. How would you approach that situation? You notice a newly qualified teacher is struggling with classroom management. Would it be option A, avoid the conversation because you don't want them to feel discouraged? Or option B, you're going to invite them in your office, recognize their strength, and let them know what you've noticed, but you're going to support them because you want them to be successful. You want them to succeed. So Tally says option B, of course. People need to know the truth. But while you tell them the truth, offer support. Use compassion. Use emotional intelligence. Yes, man. Because courage and compassion, they're not opposites, The best people, the best leaders combine both. They tell the truth without removing dignity. What did I say? Compassion and courage tell the truth, without removing dignity. Because anytime we're giving people feedback, every time we're having difficult conversations, we must always protect the dignity of the other person. Yes, you're not there to humiliate them and let them feel bad. No, they should not walk away from that conversation feeling worse. They should walk away from that conversation feeling empowered. They should walk away from a conversation with you feeling like they know how the tool, they know how to go and be better. Always remember that. So can I ask you something? Have you ever noticed how quickly we have difficult conversations about people instead of with people? Let me ask you. Do you realize how quickly sometimes we have difficult conversation about people instead of with them? Hmm? Be honest now. We're quick to have difficult conversations, to point out people's flaws, but never to let the person know. You're quick to huddle and discuss others. We're always quick. We don't hesitate. We don't fear to sit and have discussion about others, about their flaws. I like it. But never with the person themselves. Exactly. We're quick to do that. We're not fearful of saying so-and-so is weak, so-and-so needs support. We're always quick to talk about them behind their back, but never with the person. How will talking behind their back help them? How will that help them grow? You notice someone is struggling in an area, and instead of talking to them to help them and support them, you talk about it to someone else. How will that help the person? How will the person improve if you're not telling them directly to them? If you're not telling them, if there are flaws in my leadership practice, if there are things I need to work on, how will I know if you don't tell me, if you go and tell someone else? How will I know? How will I improve? How will that help me? Remember that every conversation we have about people should be to empower and encourage them. Yes. Should never be to tear down. Should never be to tear down. So we're going to talk with people instead of about people. We're going to start practicing that. We're going to be talking with them instead of about them. To think about workplaces. Sometimes concerns are discussed on corridors, in break rooms, in private messages. Everyone talks about the issue, except the person who can actually address it. And that's not leadership. And that's not healthy relationship either. Leadership doesn't gossip about people. Leadership speaks to people respectfully and directly, with the goal of restoring relationships, not winning arguments. Exactly. What did I say? Leadership doesn't gossip about people. No, they don't. Leadership speaks to people respectfully, directly, with one goal: restoring relationships, and never to get in an argument. It's not about winning an argument. It's never about that. Remember that. Remember that. So when I wrote this book, and I've been getting some really, really excellent worldwide feedback on this book. So when I wrote this book, one of the patterns I kept seeing was this. Fragile organizations don't usually fail because people stop working. They fail because people stop communicating honestly. So when you're giving feedback, the feedback becomes criticism. When you're asking someone a question, the question becomes a threat. So, and silence becomes normal. Eventually, trust will start to disappear. Because what? Healthy organizations are different. People know they can have courageous conversations without fear of humiliation, yes? They know disagreements can strengthen relationships instead of destroy them. Remember, a healthy culture isn't one where difficult conversations never happen. In any organizations, in any relationship, any friendship, any ship you have, There will be difficult conversation. Once you know how and when to have those difficult conversations respectfully. So please ensure you get a copy of this book. And come back and give me your honest feedback. So I'd like everyone to answer this honestly. What's one quality that makes a difficult conversation easier to receive? What's one quality that makes a difficult conversation easier to receive? I'm going to go first. Respect. Respect. When you're delivering that difficult conversation to the person, or when you are receiving that difficult conversation, the person who's delivering the conversation, do it so respectfully. They do so respectfully. So what's one quality that makes difficult conversations easier to receive? So I started with respect. Let me hear from someone else. Let me hear from someone else. When you're giving difficult conversation, what makes it easier to receive? I see trust. I'm going to go again. Kindness. Donna says tone. Perfect. Tone. Listening. When the person gives you the feedback, but they listen to what you have to say. They don't just give you the feedback and shut you down. The tone is correct. The tone is correct. The tone isn't there to humiliate you. When you trust that person with empathy, when they're empathetic in their delivery, they show that they understand. It is relatable. They make it relatable. Humility. Giving that feedback in privacy. Yes, privacy matters. Privacy matter. Privacy matter. No matter how simple you think it is. If you're going to have a difficult conversation with someone, do it in private. When you're honest, you don't pad it. You don't pad things. The information you're giving is honest. Because people will not reject difficult conversations unless they don't want to grow. And that would be a different discussion for another night. But once people means well, Marie says unbiasedness, exactly. Marie says unbiasedness, exactly. So people don't usually reject conversations. They don't. They reject conversations that make them feel attacked instead of understood. So difficult conversations cannot be one way. And it cannot feel as though you're attacking the person. And I'm going to talk from using my principal experience now. If you want to give a teacher feedback on their teaching, if you want to see a teacher go off, and if you want to lose trust, that teacher lose trust in you, give that feedback in a way that it seems as if you are attacking them and not developing them. Give that feedback in a way for the teacher to feel as though they're being attacked rather than being developed. And that's why the way we speak matters just as much as what we say. So here's something I want every leader and everyone to remember. Don't ask yourself, how do I avoid conversation? Do not ask yourself, how do I avoid this conversation? Ask yourself, how can I have this conversation in a way that protects the person's dignity while still addressing the truth? How can I have this conversation in a way that will protect the person's dignity? Yeah, man, you want to protect people's dignity while addressing the truth. Because truth without compassion becomes harshness. Compassion without truth becomes avoidance. And we need both when you're having difficult conversations. So here's a quote of the night. The strongest relationships aren't the ones that avoid difficult conversations. They're the ones that survive them because both people choose honesty, respect, and growth. Think about that. Because trust isn't built by pretending everything is fine. Nope, nope, nope. Trust is built when people know they can tell each other the truth and still care for one another afterwards. Yeah, man, that's how you build trust. When both of you know you can tell each other the truth and still care for one another afterwards. I have a friend. And that friend is on the live now. I have a friend, you see? And when that friend's spouse hear the two of us going at each other, the spouse have to ask, are you guys okay? And then 5 minutes after, we're good again. Can't believe we were just having that conversation, because sometimes we have real difficult conversations. Sometimes we have you'll think we're arguing, but we're having real difficult conversations. But sometimes the relationship and friendship people have can withstand any conversation. And that is where trust is built, because people will trust you to give them difficult conversation when you build that relationship with them. So can I tell you something I've learned over the years? You see, leadership? Leadership is not tested when everyone is smiling. Leadership, you see, is not tested when everyone is smiling. If everyone in the organization is smiling all the time, your leadership is not being tested. Leadership is tested, you see, when you have to sit across from another human being, knowing that the next 30 minutes may determine the future of a relationship. That's when your leadership will be tested. And that's leadership. Not because difficult conversations are enjoyable. They shouldn't be enjoyable. But because great leaders and good people, not just great, good people with good intentions, care too much to allow silence to destroy what honesty could have repaired. I've never met anyone or any leader who enjoyed difficult conversations. I've never met such a person. But I have met many people who wished they had them sooner. And that's the difference. Because maturity, and also leadership maturity, isn't measured by how long you avoid difficult conversations. No, it's measured by how courageously and compassionately you step into them. Always remember that. So it's time for the principal's chair. Every night I give you the opportunity to be principals, if you're not already a principal. So it's time for that moment. So tonight's situation is one that thousands of leaders experience every year. Imagine you're the principal of a school. One of your teachers is exceptional with children. The parents love them as usual. Colleagues respect them. They're committed, passionate, they're kind. But over the past 6 weeks, you notice something. They started coming to school late. Their planning isn't as thorough. Let's say plans are skimpy. Deadlines, they're not meeting deadlines anymore. Their classroom organization has declined. This isn't the teacher you know. Your deputy principal says, we need to start capability procedures. Another leader says, maybe they're just losing motivation. You as a leader decide to do something different. Instead of beginning with performance, you begin with a question. You invite the teacher into your office. you close the door, you say, before we talk about work, I just want to ask one question. How are you? The teacher sits silently for almost 30 seconds. Then they begin to cry. You discover something nobody else knew. Their partner has recently lost their job. They're caring for an ill parent. They're sleeping only 3 hours at night. They've been trying desperately to hold everything together. My question, what changed? The teacher? No. The conversation? Because until that moment, everyone was ready to go and manage performance. Nobody was willing to understand the person. Now let me ask you a question as a principal now. If you had followed the advice of your deputy principals and the other leaders and had gone straight into criticizing the teacher, would you have discovered the truth? Would you have discovered all the things that that teacher is going through? Would you have discovered the truth? Probably not. Jay Salmon says no, probably not. And that's why difficult conversation isn't just about speaking. It isn't. They're about listening deeply enough for the real issue to emerge. Listening deeply enough for the real problem to emerge. So here's something I want every leader, everyone to remember. Performance problems sometimes have performance solutions. Sometimes they have human solutions. But great leaders know the difference. A spreadsheet won't tell you someone is grieving. It won't. A performance report won't tell you someone is caring for a sick child. An attendance record won't tell you someone is battling anxiety. A leader's first responsibility isn't to assume. Your first responsibility is to understand. That doesn't mean avoiding accountability, it doesn't. It means making sure accountability is informed by compassion rather than assumption. So you can't assume things. You can't assume the teacher is coming late to school because they sleep late. No, you can't assume that. And you won't know unless you have that conversation with the teacher to find out what is happening. And I want to share something with you that I've learned. Because I've gotten this difficult conversation thing wrong so many times. I've gotten this difficult conversation thing wrong so many times. But over time, you get better at it. And I'm still not great at it, but over time, you get better at it. So some of the most important conversations I've ever had weren't the ones where I spoke the most. No. They were the ones where I listened the longest. Because leadership taught me that people often tell you what's wrong. They will. Only after they've become convinced it is safe to tell you. And that's why in any organization, in any situation, trust matters. So if people believe you'll judge them, they'll hide. If people believe you'll listen, they'll often tell you exactly what you need to know. Because leadership isn't just about asking better questions. It is about creating an environment where people feel safe enough to answer honestly. And DJG, and when I gave the scenario earlier about a child, the son, DJG says the environment would have been created for the son to talk. And Dav says trust definitely matters. It does. Mandy says it's hard for some people to listen. Truly listen without interjecting. And that's so true. So here's another book, The Teaching and Learning Leader. So one of the principles I write about throughout this book is that leadership is fundamentally relational. It is relational. Before we can improve teaching, we need to build what? Trust. Before we can improve performance, we need to strengthen relationships. Before we can implement any change, we need to develop people first. So instructional leadership isn't simply about observing lessons. It's about coaching people. It's about encouraging growth. It's about having conversations that challenge people while also supporting them. Because people don't grow through fear. They grow through trust. They grow through reflection. They grow through purposeful feedback. And remember, the best leaders don't avoid difficult conversations. No. They transform them into opportunities for learning, restoration, and growth. Make sure you get a copy and come back with the feedback. When you get a copy, read it, please. Please read it. But that's the only way you'll learn. Read it. So here's a leadership framework I want to share with you tonight. Mandy says, you will never have true solid relationship without trust. That's true. Sean says true. You will never have true solid relationships without trust. Dav says, I love that book. It is a good book. It is a really, really good book. And not because I wrote it, but it is a good book. It is a good book. And that's why it is doing so well right now in Australia. This book is doing so well in several schools in Australia. And that's why I'm now motivated. And I'm currently working on part 2 of this book. Because I'm going to provide more depth. So part 2 of this book is coming. Now, having said that, I want to share a leadership framework with you. A leadership framework. So when you're preparing for a difficult conversation, I want you to remember these 5 questions. So I'm not going to just come here tonight and tell you that, oh, we need to start having more difficult conversations. And you walk away from this session saying, Dale can go and chat. It's not that easy. No, I don't want you to walk away saying that. I'm going to give you practical tools in how to deliver or how to approach difficult conversations. And you can tweak it and turn it any way you want. So first, ask yourself this question. Am I having this conversation to help or simply to win? There's a difference. There's a difference. You need to go in clear and know if you're going to have that difficult conversation with the person to help them, or you're going to have that conversation because you want to win and show that you're the boss. If your goal is to win, if your goal is to help, exactly, one impact the other, help win, exactly. The second thing, you need to ask yourself, have I listened enough to understand the whole story? Not just the behavior, the story behind the behavior. So whatever situation we're going to address, ensure you give the individual the platform to express themselves. And don't interject, don't butt in. Stop coming to conclusion halfway before the person finish explaining to you why what is happening. Give them the platform to tell you what is happening and why it is happening. And third, always ask yourself this question. Am I protecting this person's dignity? Sean says, listen, understand, and action. Perfect. The third thing you ask yourself, am I protecting this person's dignity? You can't make people walk away from any conversation feeling little, feeling less than themselves, feeling like they're nobody. You're wrong if you do that. Nobody should walk away from a conversation with you feeling deflated. So think about this. Welcome Keisha, am I protecting this person's dignity? Show should never require humiliation. No. Truth should never require humiliation. People remember how we made them feel long after they've forgotten the exact words we've used. The first thing, have I been specific? Don't say you're not committed. Never say that. You say, I've noticed you've been late 3 times this month, and I wanted to understand what's happening. Yes, man. And that will give the person the opportunity to explain. They're caring for a child. They don't have any vehicle anymore, so they're sharing vehicle, they're carpooling. They have anxiety coming to work nowadays, and sometimes they don't really want to come. And I said, Keisha says, amen. I said, Mandy says, powerful words. Truth should never require humiliation. Nikki says, truth should never, exactly. Truth should never require humiliation. And Keisha says, the anxiety is real. So when you're having that difficult conversation and you share this specific observation, it creates productive conversation. Because when you're going with just accusations, when you enter a conversation with pure accusation and hearsay without the truth, it creates defensiveness. And rightly so. The person have all right to become defensive. But when you go in and ask the question and ask the person to tell you, to give you information, to tell you what's happening, they'll be more receptive. They'll receive information better. And finally, am I leaving this person with hope? Mandy says, there's a time and place for these conversations. We must be careful of the mental state of the person. Good night, India. Welcome. So every difficult conversation should end with a pathway forward. Not just a description of the problem. What did I say? Every difficult conversation should and must end with a pathway forward. People should know what they're going to do next, how they're going to correct it, how you're going to work with them to resolve it. It shouldn't be about describing the problem. Because great leaders don't leave people feeling defeated. No. Nobody should walk away from a conversation with you feeling deflated and defeated. No, you're wrong for that. They leave them believing improvement is possible. They should leave difficult conversations believing that improvement is possible. And Mandy says, every difficult conversation must end with a pathway forward. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Miss Mandy. Every difficult conversation must end with a pathway forward. Remember to like the live, share the live, invite a friend and ask a friend to invite their friend. You're locked in to Leadership Unscripted. So now it's time for the family table. Tonight's question may be one of the most important your family discusses this year. And I want you to ask everyone in your family this. What's one conversation someone had with you that changed your life for the better? You can ask your spouse, a friend, or anybody. Maybe it was a teacher, a coach, a parent, a grandparent, or a mentor. Then you're going to ask them this. How can we become a family that tells each other the truth with kindness instead of avoiding difficult conversation? Ask your partner. How can we become better for each other? By telling each other the truth. But when we're telling each other the truth, we do it with kindness. And we're not avoiding difficult conversations. Because healthy families, healthy relationships, healthy workplaces don't avoid difficult conversations. They learn how to have them with love. So here's your challenge before we meet again. I want you to think about the one conversation you've been avoiding. Think about that one conversation you have been avoiding. Not the easiest one, the important one. And this week, don't send a text, please. Do not send a text. Don't send an email if a conversation if a conversation is more appropriate. Arrange a time, call the person, sit down, and speak honestly. Speak respectfully, speak with compassion, and remember, your goal isn't to prove you're right. Never. Your goal is never to prove you're right. Your goal is to strengthen the relationship while addressing the truth. Because courage without compassion becomes harshness. And sometimes I know as a leader I can be harsh, but that's an area I'm working on. And that's why, as I said, we're learning together. Compassion without courage becomes avoidance. Leadership, you see, requires compassion. It requires compassion, and it requires the truth. So as we close tonight's show, I want you to imagine two leaders. Imagine two leaders. Both care deeply about people. Both of them care deeply about people. One leader avoids difficult conversations because they don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. The other leader has those conversations with humility, kindness, and respect because they care too much to allow people to continue to struggle without support. Which leader would you rather work for? Which leader would help you become a better version of yourself? Real leadership isn't always comfortable. Real leadership is commitment. It's committed. Committed enough to tell the truth. Committed enough to listen. Committed enough to stay in the conversation until understanding begins to grow. Because sometimes the greatest act of leadership isn't delivering a brilliant speech. No. The greatest act of leadership is I've never been to deliver a brilliant speech. It's sitting across from one person, having one honest conversation that changed the direction of their life. So as I close tonight, I want to thank you for spending your evening, another evening with me on Leadership Unscripted. I really appreciate the support. I really, really appreciate the support. And that's why I've invested and I'm investing so much in this platform. So if tonight's conversation encouraged you, challenged you, or reminded you of someone you need to speak with, don't let this become just another program you watched. Let it become a conversation you have. And if this episode added value to your life, share it with a principal, share it with a teacher, a manager, a parent, a coach, a pastor, or anyone carrying the responsibility of leading people. Because every leader needs the courage to have difficult conversations. And every person deserves to be spoken to with honesty, dignity, and compassion. And as I said, tonight's live will be downloaded and will be uploaded to my YouTube channel. If you have not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, the handle is Dr. R. Dale. Please go over to YouTube and subscribe to that channel. Pretty soon, we're going to be going live from YouTube as well. So I want to leave you with this. Most relationships don't end because one difficult conversation was had. They end because the conversation that needed to happen never did. Most relationships don't end because one difficult conversation was had. No, they end because the conversation that needed to happen never did. And one final thought for tonight. One courageous conversation, handled with honesty and compassion, can restore trust, build confidence, save a career, strengthen a family, and sometimes even change the course of a person's life. Never underestimate the power of a conversation that begins with courage and ends with care. What did I say? Your conversations should begin with courage and end with care. I'm Dr. Ryan Dale. Until next time, keep leading with courage, keep listening with compassion, and remember, the conversation you avoid may preserve your comfort today. The conversation you have with wisdom, humility, and love may transform someone's tomorrow. Good night. God bless. Good night, Candice. So our topic for tonight, for tomorrow night, rather, the leader nobody wants to admit they became. That's our topic for tomorrow night. The leader nobody wants to admit they became. That's our topic for tomorrow night. Promises to be an interesting conversation. Good night, everyone. Sleep well, rest well. Remember, approach every single conversation. Approach every conversation with care. Approach it with courage and end with care. Approach every conversation with courage and end it showing the person should walk away knowing and feeling that you care for them. As Nikki says, go and have that difficult conversation. I need to have one too. Go and have that difficult conversation. Good night. God bless.